Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel today. I'm really excited to be moderating the Brand Building 101 panel with representatives from some of the leading brands in this cannabis industry. Before we turn it over and introduce our panelists, I want to quickly introduce myself. I am Susanna Rubenstein. I'm the Director of Marketing at LeafLink. For those who don't know, LeafLink is the cannabis industry's wholesale marketplace. We connect thousands of cannabis brands and retailers across 26 territories in North America, including some of the brands, actually all the brands that you'll be see featured here. So if you're a licensed retailer in any of their states, you can log on to LeafLink to order their products. And without further ado, I will let our panelists introduce themselves. We are still waiting on one. There he is, actually. Joe, welcome to the event. But I'm going to pass it off. I'll call on each of you. It would be great if, in addition...
I'm so sorry, guys.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining. We're just doing intros, so you didn't miss anything.
So sorry.
But what we're going to do is I will
Got it.
call on each panelist. It'd be great if you could say, in addition to introducing yourself, just a little bit more about your brand, like what kind of products you sell, what states you're available in. And we'll start with Peter.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure to be here with all of you today. My name is Peter Barsoom. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of 1906. We're one of the leading edibles brands. We're currently sold in Colorado, Oklahoma, and soon launching in Illinois and Massachusetts. And 1906 is focused on the category and has created the category that we call functional cannabis. Cannabis for people for whom it's not about getting high, it's not about smoking, it's about feeling a particular way. And we're the only low dose, controlled dose, fast acting edible that delivers a specific experience.
Awesome. Thank you. I will pass it over to Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm leading the Old Pal marketing team, clearly with Old Pal. Old Pal is first and foremost a flower brand. We're available in California and Nevada currently, and have a couple other states on the horizon for launch in the next few months here. But Old Pal is really about kind of the nostalgic nature of cannabis, kind of bringing it back to its roots, like simplicity, weed the way it's always been grown and smoked and enjoyed by people and communities to bring people together. So we really lean into the whole shareable nature and shareable aspect of cannabis. Obviously, that is something that we've had to shift slightly here in COVID times, more so pushing responsible, shareable cannabis use. But yeah, we keep it really simple, just, selling weed the way we've all smoked it and the way people have smoked it for generations before us, and offering great value for our customers so that all walks of life can enjoy legal cannabis.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. It looks like we might have had Joe drop off, but when he gets back on, I can have him do a quick intro. Joe, are you with us? Okay. The first question I want to ask is just kind of setting the stage. So I think we all know cannabis is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing industry right now. And you guys have operated in the space for a good amount of time. So how have you seen the landscape change since you started? You can kind of approach this from whatever angle, but I know this is kind of a brand building panel, so you can definitely talk about the brand side of things as well. Whoever would like to start.
Go ahead, Allison.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in cannabis or working with cannabis companies for the last 4 years. My original foray into the space was via an ad agency working on both product design and brand design and launch campaigns for what is now Humboldt, but was Doses back in the day. And, thinking back and thinking about how the industry has changed from 4 years ago when I was really first introduced to legal recreational cannabis, I think you're just seeing a maturity happening across all industries being like each state kind of its own separate industry, if you will, because they're all operating under their own regulations. But yeah, just seeing like an industry, obviously it's still in its infancy and there's a lot that's being worked out with overall like operations, everything from cultivation to supply chain to brands. But seeing it mature into a proper industry itself. I think also like thinking back to the days when there are always still a lot of brands flooding the market, but I think brands are growing up and really understanding what it means to be a brand, and more so a brand less of just a product with some great brand design around it. So really seeing brands kind of move into their own and step into their own and really own what it's like to be an actual CPG brand, and thinking about that consumer experience overall more so than they ever have in the past. You can get great weed on a shelf, but just throwing some brand design around it doesn't really make it a brand. That's just a product with some great design. And so it's really great to see more brands understanding what it means to be a brand in the space and really start to emulate that. And I think it just elevates the industry all around. It brings credibility to the products that are offered to consumers. And also consumers are starting to demand more of brands as well, just like they would in any other CPG space. So yeah, I think maturity all around from a brand perspective, maturity from our consumers and understanding what they need and they want more. That's what I've noticed over the last 4 years.
Yeah, building on what Allison said, so my wife and I started the company in 2015, and our view was that really we love smoking flower, and I love Old Pal, but there are times and there are opportunities and moments where you can't or won't or not able to smoke flower. And the edibles experience, and it still hasn't largely changed, by and large, suffers from three major problems. One is that you have no idea how it's going to make you feel. Two is that it takes way too much time to start to feel the effects. And three, it's often made with poor quality ingredients, high fructose corn syrup, stuff that you wouldn't normally put in your body. And it's like, it is a poor representation of the cannabis experience is what most edibles are. And so what we set out to do is create a non-smokables experience that gives you all the best of flower, which is fast acting, high quality, and gives you a specific effect. If somebody rolled you a joint and said, I have no idea what's in this, it's just a whole bunch of different trim, it's going to take 60 minutes for it to hit you, and I have no idea how long it's going to last or how it's going to affect you, you would never light that up. But that's often what we're told to do with an edibles experience. And so that was our mission back then. And I got to tell you, when we were going out in Colorado to dispensaries, we moved out from New York, my wife and I, to Colorado to start the business. People told us we were crazy, that people don't care about, quality, that all they want is maximum potency and the cheapest weed. And we're like, I don't believe that. And lo and behold, I think some of the big things that have changed right now is the caliber of consumers that's coming in. Consumers are demanding, like Allison said, better quality. And it's not just about cheap weed, and it's not just about getting high.
Right. I think, that was an early bet that you made, but one that I think we've seen a lot of consumers and the industry as a whole kind of come around to and understand a bit more. Hi, Joe. You're back.
So if I'm super disruptive, if this happens again, I will just apologize and drop off. I really do apologize, guys.
That's okay. Do you want to take an opportunity to quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Wana, what kind of products you guys have and in what states you're available?
Sure. Joe Hodes. Thank you. Joe Hodes, Chief Marketing Officer for Wana Brands. Wana Brands is the largest edibles company in the country. We have products in currently 9 states plus Canada, and soon to be launching a few more even before the end of this year. In our portfolio, our primary mainstay is our gummy product line, and we have 2 varieties of those, our classic and our quick, which are a fast-acting gummy that we launched back in March. But we also have a few other products, a new one that we're about to launch, which is a fast-acting tincture. We also have our tarts, and we make vapes and long extended-release capsules. So across all of those states, we have a variety of products in various states.
Awesome. Thank you so much for getting us up to speed there. So as the next question for the group, we just talked about kind of how the industry has changed overall over the past years since state-by-state legalization. Knowing here that we probably have a lot of people who haven't entered into or aren't currently working in the cannabis space and are interested in getting into it, what do you think are some of the biggest considerations that a newcomer in the industry might not think about when it comes to kind of launching and growing a successful brand in cannabis?
I think Allison said it really well. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
It's
No, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I think the biggest thing for people to understand is that the cannabis space and the cannabis consumer is not like any other consumer. And I know that in some markets or some products you can take one product and essentially take that blueprint and put it into another category. Cannabis is truly different, and I know many people think that their industries are different. So it's not the first time you've probably heard that, but cannabis is truly different. And understanding the cannabis, not only the product itself, but also the consumer that's consuming that product and why, is critically important to being able to build an appropriate brand and a product that's going to sell and also solve a problem for that consumer.
Yeah, I think, Joe, I would say, I don't believe the cannabis consumer is any different than a consumer. Just let's have a little controversy here. Okay. I think I think consumers are consumers. I think cannabis as a category is different, and it's different because many of us have had a relationship with the plant for a long time. That's one thing. The second thing is that this is a psychoactive substance. It's not just a bottle of water or a chocolate bar, and it has. And then the third is the social stigma or the stigmas that we have associated with it. So I think that creates some slightly different consumer behavior and orientation. In other worlds, it just because a celebrity endorses, a brand, maybe that makes that brand skyrocket. I mean, one of the things that we have found here in cannabis is that celebrity endorsements don't mean shit. They're setting aside, Willie Nelson's brand, which has probably done the best of all the celebrity brands. There's no other celebrity brand that has done well. They've all been epic failures.
Just PR stunts overall, really.
Yeah. And so I think but if you look at, for instance, in alcohol, celebrity endorsements and celebrity brands around alcohol, some of those have done very well. So I think that the consumer in cannabis can sometimes be a little bit more discerning. And in part, that's because it's a psychoactive substance. It's not just, a gin.
Yeah, for sure. Building off of.
Well, despite you saying that was a controversial remark back, I think, Peter, we're actually saying the same thing. So we're actually saying that consumer is different because of their relationship with the plant.
Cool.
So.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, going off of what Peter said with consumers just being more discerning, there's a lot of education and just a lot of hesitation too from the consumer side of entering into the space if you're getting back into smoking weed again or consuming weed in whatever form that you choose, and doing it in a legal space is people are it's interesting, it's legal, and people are more weary of that than buying from just like the guy that they used to buy from all the time, so I think there is this, just dropping a brand into the cannabis space, it's not, the likelihood of that taking off isn't going to happen, whereas you can have a really strong brand in a lot of other startup or CPG spaces and maybe have some quick success like that. But in cannabis, there's a lot of, I think, hand-holding that needs to go on with the consumers. Consumers are still becoming more comfortable with it overall. I mean, there's obviously a subset of consumers that have been diehard in this space for a very long time and need no support to navigate the space and navigate what form factor they may be taking or what products they want to go after. But the larger opportunity are consumers that are not all that familiar with the space. And so there is a level of making sure that your consumers feel comfortable about your brand, feel comfortable about the products. The transparency, I think, is really key. Especially, we've mentioned this a few times, as consumers are continuing to mature in this space, they're demanding that, just like any other industry out there. Like, obviously that's been a trend for the last 10, 15 years of consumers really, really demanding and understanding more about the companies that they're supporting and the brands that they're supporting. And that doesn't change in cannabis. So I think there's this notion of people just build it and they will come in cannabis. And that's not really the case. You really have to support a strong brand with your brand values and your ethos, and bring your consumers along with you on that journey. Because just wrapping a product in a pretty brand design isn't going to do it. There's way too much competition out there, and there's still a lot of uncertainty on the consumer side.
Makes sense. So I want to acknowledge the time that we're living in right now, and that your business may have adapted significantly during the past year, few months. So I wanted to ask the group, how has COVID kind of shifted your operations or your brand strategy, your marketing, and kind of how do you keep kind of pushing through and persevering, building your brand during a time like this? Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll start with Peter on this one.
Sure. Yeah. I think, first and foremost, it has reminded us kind of the fragility of life, and how the challenges of the demands of life, and that there is more, the quality of that nothing beats the quality of our life, that a healthy populace is equal to a healthy economy. And I think that's, for us, kind of one of the first lessons, and an expanded view of what health means. Stress, lack of sleep, all these other things are really negative contributors to quality of life. And this is an area where cannabis could help. So the fact that cannabis was deemed essential in every single market where cannabis is legal is profound. I mean, who could have guessed this a few years ago, that pharmacies and cannabis dispensaries would be essential businesses and open, except for Massachusetts adult use stores, open everywhere during a time when every other business was shut down. And I think we have to, acknowledge that this milestone in our history. And that cannabis also has an important role to play as an alternative to alcohol, pharmaceuticals, and all the other things that we do in order to maintain and be manage the stresses of daily life. For us, we had launched our 1906 drops, which are pharmaceutical grade pressed tablets, in January, so right before the pandemic. And those have taken off. It's now over 60% of our business today. And what we found is that, people are concerned about their respiratory health. People are concerned about their overall health. And with the 1906 drops, cannabis as medicine has finally arrived in a medicinal format, and so people really are gravitating towards vegan, gluten-free, calorie-free, sugar-free, ways to consume cannabis, especially as it becomes a part of your daily routine. And I think that's what we've seen is, a dramatic shift in our business, that people want sort of microdose, and that people want our drops as a pill format. It's created us opportunities now to expand in states that we never would have thought we'd be having on our radar screen. So thankfully, we're in a aggressive expansion mode. And COVID has taught us also how to be really lean. There's not much money out there. You got to tighten your belt and you got to evolve. And we've had to do that and sort of play, ninja kind of in our abilities to stretch ourselves and do more for less.
Anyone else have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would say for us, digital has always been something that is top of mind for us. But right now during COVID times, it's really where we're putting all of our efforts. And I think, continuing to bridge those gaps of digital to brick and mortar is something that we've been focusing a ton on. It was definitely something that was on our radar and on our roadmap for continuing to really kind of figure out, even from like a data perspective, like how do we bridge that gap of like our digital community versus what's happening in brick and mortar. And now with everything shifting for a while, really kind of only online and only digital, like Nevada, for instance, for us for a couple months was only delivery, while prior to COVID, they barely had any delivery services out there and everything was brick and mortar. So like, just like going off of what Peter said, learning how to work really lean and also just nimbly, because there's even in this time frame of the however many months we've been in this, whatever you want to call this situation, use whatever adjective you please there, but it's even shifted in that time frame. Like Nevada was online only for a little and now they're back to brick and mortar. So just continuing to be incredibly nimble and rolling with the punches. I think, people have asked me like, oh, how detrimental has COVID been to the cannabis industry? Thankfully, the cannabis industry, from my perspective, has always been, it's always kind of rocky. There's always random surprises that come up with regulations that are unclear and, confusing and differing from state to state. You have to, it's inherent in this industry to have that ability to be nimble. So I think it actually set us all up once we were deemed essential, which I think everyone on this call would, say that they're very grateful that cannabis was deemed essential, not only from a financial perspective personally, but also just like my personal use of cannabis, I know has gone way up during this time, given all the amount of stress and everything going on. But, I think we're all set up to already be very nimble in this space, because there's always rolling with the punches in cannabis. So from our perspective, it's really been kind of similar to what Peter was saying, figuring out how to work with far leaner budgets, but still, continuing to engage our community and continuing to meet our community where they're at and give them resources that they need to hopefully, distract themselves, reduce some stress and enjoy some moments in their life, because that's really important to make sure that we all remember that still got to enjoy life, even though there's a lot of negative things going on, a lot of really heavy things going on these days, but finding moments of joy is still very important.
Right. Joe,
so the problem with going third after two eloquent people is they've said most of. But I will just add that, on the Wana side, we actually are looking at how to invest further right now. So we're taking a little bit of a different tack from lean to making investments, and it's also had a fundamental impact on our strategy from a marketing standpoint, rapidly shifting from primarily a B2B marketing approach with a B2B marketing budget to almost exclusively B2C, without totally forgetting about the B2B part. So there's been major shifts there in terms of our innovation pipeline and development, what products we're working on and why. And then also, I would say, from a brand perspective, really giving us not only an impetus, but also the time and the focus to be able to look internally and say, who are we as a brand and as a company, and who do we want to be coming out of this. And I think it's had a fundamental impact on all of us as people and as a corporate entity.
Awesome. Actually, that segues very nicely into my next question, which I want to kind of take a minute and assume that a lot of our audience is new to this industry. Being in the cannabis space as a brand, you obviously can't sell directly to consumers. You have to sell through a licensed retailer. And so as a marketer, that poses the question of how do you balance both marketing to consumers and your B2B marketing? Because you really need retailers who believe in your products and kind of are those gatekeepers for you. Joe, do you want to lead us off, since you were kind of just talking about it a little bit?
Yeah, I get to go first this time.
Yeah.
Yes. So, there is, you can never B2B, we're wholesalers, right? So we have to keep that customer in mind. Now, I think everyone on this panel has a little bit of a leg up, because we've been in the market and we have relationships. People trust the brands and the products and the people behind those products. So if you were a brand new company with a brand new product trying to launch into a market right now, I'd say it's very challenging. But for us, we have those relationships, so we're able to, I think, make sure that we continue to maintain communications, appropriate marketing communications with our B2B and our customers, but also able to look a little more broadly at how we're going to create consumer pull-through. And one of the things that we did, for example, was implementing an e-commerce platform through our website, through iHeartJane, and that allows us to drive traffic actually to the dispensaries, which I think has been really beneficial both for us and for them. But also putting dollars towards how do we get those eyeballs to our website and drive them dispensary level to make the purchase. So we found a lot of traction there, and I think dispensaries are looking at that as an actual resource and assistance for them to help build their traffic as well. So we're kind of doing both, and we're just making sure that we're ramping up the content. We're really heavily focused on all of our various channels for content. We've always been decent at making sure that we have regular email communications. We've now really begun to focus on that. An important hire for us on the marketing side was a copywriter, and she has been just phenomenal in terms of ramping up that content game. So that was a big, I think that was a big move forward for us there. So that's one of the ways that I think we're doing a great job of keeping in touch with our customers, and also the appreciation aspect, right? So that's been very important too. It's no longer just about, hey, can we sell you our product? Here's what it is. We're going to launch it, et cetera, et cetera. It's been very much about, thank you so much for staying open. Thank you so much for being essential workers. And also thank you for being great customers and sticking with us all through this.
Thanks, Joe. Allison?
Yeah, I mean, Joe touched on a lot of kind of similar things from the Old Pal perspective of what we're doing. But I would just say, you know, at the highest level, it's like having empathy for our retail partners and just how difficult it is on their end of trying to keep their staff safe, keep the experience safe, trying to drive traffic into stores when, you know, we're all supposed to be physically distant from each other. So really, I think, you know, sales and marketing really is the backbone of Old Pal. I mean, we've got an amazing operations team as well, but sales and marketing is really where we put a lot of our focus. And I think Old Pal does a phenomenal job at our consumer facing marketing. And we've actually, kind of opposite of what Joe said, are now shifting a little bit more to be very aware and focused on supporting our retail partners. I mean, thankfully for Old Pal, our products fly off of the shelves. And so in the past, it wasn't a huge concern for us, because more of our concern was keeping products on shelves and keeping that supply up. And now, you know, obviously helping our retail partners to inform people that they're still open, inform people about the products that they have. And yeah, just to be, you know, more empathetic for them and the struggles that they go through on a daily basis of trying to keep their lights on and keep their businesses going. And we've focused a lot of our support and kind of this appreciation that Joe was talking about in the last bit, shifting spends to things like providing face masks for our bud tenders. We've provided floor decals for dispensaries so that, you know, they have assets and materials that they need to keep people distant. And so things like that, where it's like just taking like one thing off of their list of needing to do, like getting floor decals so that people know where to stand and remind people that 6 foot apart is a protocol now. So things like that, just always trying to figure out like, how can we make our retail partners' lives easier? How can we continue to drive more traffic? We're starting to get into co-op buys of digital paid spends. A lot of our retail partners in the past have asked us to do like co-marketing spends. And of course, people used to want big flashy billboards. And now we're like, can we just drive some eyeballs to your site? Because that's what's going to sell. And like less around this like sexy marketing and more around just like hard hitting, what's going to get us our biggest return, what's going to get you traffic, what's going to get you eyeballs. So that's really what we've been focusing on during this shift of consumer behavior and like the shopping experience in the space.
I think Allison, I think they covered it far better than I could.
So this is actually something I've been thinking about a little bit too, and I'm hoping you guys have a good answer here, because you've all, you know, been there early stages of these brands. But what comes first when you're first starting to launch a brand? Is it important first to get the retailers kind of on board and feeling that brand affinity, or the consumers, or is it both at the same time?
I mean, I don't think, yeah, you first you need to figure out what if you're building a company, kind of what the value is that you're trying to create, right? A brand is a promise. That in a nutshell, what is a brand? It is a promise, and good brands fulfill on that promise, and bad brands either never make a promise or don't fulfill on that promise, right? So you could have a brand, for instance, that is very much a retail centric brand, and rely upon their efforts to bring consumers in. You could also have a brand that is more of a D2C brand. If you're not being cognizant of both sets of stakeholders, you're unlikely to be successful. So it's a little hard to kind of answer that in the abstract, Susanna.
Yeah, I figured. Anyone else?
But it's a great question. I mean, it's a great question. It's just hard to give sort of like a universal answer on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, as the consumer in the cannabis space continues to mature, like we've talked about earlier, having recognition of a brand and understanding what a brand stands for and going into shops and seeing that available, I think is incredibly important. So that's really focusing on that consumer side and like brand awareness. But at the same time too, like your frontline defense are your bud tenders. And if they're not on board with your brand, they don't understand your brand, they don't know how to sell your brand. Like you run a lot of risk of having people, these hundreds of thousands of bud tenders out there, that are potentially speaking not accurately about this brand promise that you may have worked so hard to build. So from my perspective, it's almost like, I don't know if one's more important than the other. I find them both to be incredibly equal. Like, supporting our bud tenders and the retail staff to really understand and carry that message through and deliver on that brand promise is huge. And that's like what a lot of our sales and our territory marketing, our territory managers focus on, is like making sure that there is a universal understanding of what Old Pal stands for, and what we're there to deliver to the consumer. So I think that's just as equally important, because it's all consumer facing at the end of the day then, right? Like what we're putting out versus what bud tenders are talking about, it's all consumer facing. So you better hope that those messages are aligned, because consumers will see through that if not.
The only thing I was going to add to that is, and you guys have said this, but I'll be more succinct. The bud tender, the people in this industry are consumers, and therefore you can't really separate the two, and that's a little bit unique. There, maybe microbrews might be another parallel to that. But if you look at apparel, or if you look at other CPG type of products, there's not that parallel where every single person in the industry just about is that consumer. So you have to have parity between the two, otherwise it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a story. When we came out with kind of our first set of products, and everything we do is 5 milligrams or below, right? And this was back in early 2017, where at least in Colorado, many of the bud tenders have a much higher tolerance, and so the common feedback we would get initially from the bud tenders is, 5 milligrams doesn't do it to me. I need 100 milligrams before I wake up, and it's like, excuse me, it's like, well, you're not the consumer, right? And, a big part of the challenge actually was say, not everybody's like you. There are other people out there who don't want, a 6-hour date with an edible, and they don't need 30 milligrams, to drive their car, which nobody should, by the way. So that was a big effing challenge that we had. So what did we do? We actually created a 20 milligram product on the medical side, our 20 milligram Bliss cups and our 20 milligram Love beans, which are phenomenal and huge. I mean, what's that?
I said, I can attest, I've had them. They're great.
Yeah. And so we created our 20 milligram Bliss cups and our 20 milligram beans, not really to sell them, but just basically so we could use them as sampling for bud tenders. Like, okay, you want to see what a higher dose product is from 1906? It's the bomb. We know how to make amazing effing product. Now, can you please go and sell 5 milligram products to consumers who really need that?
I love that story, Peter. I'm going to pivot us a little bit to focus a little bit more on product itself, because we've been talking about brand more holistically, but obviously I think each of you, you kind of have a core product category that you're known for here. And so I'm curious, what does it take to build up, a product or a category that is very well known within a market? And what does that look like?
From Old Pal's perspective, I would say consistency. I think you could talk to a lot of people in the space where, people are talking about flower use declining, more people consuming edibles, all that jazz. And while yes, that's true, there is still a huge portion of the consumer segment that smokes flower the old-fashioned way, rolling a joint, smoke, like packing a bong, whatever. And so I think it's just really for us, it's been staying tried and true to what our mission is, what our promise is to deliver consistent quality and deliver value to our consumers. And so for us, it's been staying steadfast in that mission and just continuing to hone in on everything that goes into being able to provide that to our consumers, from our supply chain, working with our farmer partners to get more visibility to harvests that are upcoming so that we can make sure that we've got product consistently on the shelves for consumers, and all the way down to making sure that our product is consistent everywhere you go, in every state that you get it. So just continuing for us to stay true to what our roots are. There will always be a flower consumer out there. And we're going to be there to provide them great value, great product every single time.
I think, Allison, I want to just build on that. Allison, you said it right. It's about focus. And one of the beautiful things about Old Pal is they are focused, and they do it well, and they're very clear about what the mission of Old Pal is, and as a consumer, what the consumer experience, and they just continue to do that over and that's what makes Old Pal one of the best brands, I think, in all of cannabis, because you see the dedication, you see the focus, what it is that they stand for. So kudos to you, Allison, and to the whole Old Pal team for, really setting the bar high for what the rest of us need to be in the industry.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Awesome. I feel like we have time for a couple more. I know we started a bit late. I guess as a follow-up question, so, while there is a lot of focus here, I think we see a lot of cannabis brands, and whether it's pivoting into an entirely new category or just kind of introducing a new product, apart from your core, your staple, your tentpole product, how do you decide when it's time to do that? And how do you decide which types of products to look into?
Joe, given how wide your product range is, maybe that's kind of best for you to kick us off on that.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I think it's there's a lot that goes into that, right? So there is data and research. So we look, but that's going to kind of tell you a little bit historically where things have been, and what the consumer demand is, and that might give you some inkling as to what's coming up, what the consumer is most interested in, and where you should focus your product innovation. However, for us, we also like to look outside of the industry to understand general consumer trends and behavior. And then, of course, we listen to our consumers. That's the most important thing. We do hear a lot from our consumers about what they are looking for. And for us, we've been really focused on that's a very core part of our brand, is looking at what is next, whether that's with additional ingredients, whether that's rare cannabinoids, custom terpene profiles. So all of that is what leads for us versus the format. And by that I mean it's not like, oh well, we've done gummies, now let's do chocolate. It's more about taking products that we know that our consumers like and that they count on us for, and then taking the innovation and putting it into those delivery vehicles. So that's really how we drive our innovation pipeline, or our pipeline rather, is through an innovation lens and understanding where the consumer is looking for 6 months to a year from now.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything to add there?
I mean, for us, I'll just, talk about our drops. I think it's always good to look at the data, but don't listen to the data too much also. Because as an example, when we thought of and conceptualized the drops product line, pills and tablets were a small and insignificant portion of cannabis consumption, kind of sub 5%. So if you looked at the data, all you would do is make another gummy. Joe makes a great gummy. We don't need any more gummies. Like, seriously, if your idea is to make another gummy, go home. Figure something else out. Like really, the last thing this world needs is another gummy. And if you want a good gummy, Wana is the best. So, like, stop it and do something else with your time. But so we looked at it and was like, okay, this is odd. When we think about medicine, what is the way in which we take medicine? It's a pill, right? When you need something to help you sleep, what do you normally take? You might take an Ambien. If you have ADD, like I did for 20 plus years, what did I take every day? Adderall or Ritalin. And so we ignored the data, and we said, there's something deeper here about a consumer insight. And I think that's another thing that is really important is you need to, having that consumer insight, is critical to product development and innovation. And that's where you kind of get, you create the most innovative experiences and products when you go sort of when you go in with a consumer insight that may be that may be unexpected.
Makes sense.
I know we've had a few questions, Susanna. Somebody asked, maybe we should answer. Somebody asked because given that this is the panel, for Vangst, somebody said, for the people here who want to break into the industry, what advice should they consider that is relevant to brand building?
Oh my gosh, I missed the question. I mean, that was actually one of where are you seeing questions? I'll figure it out later. But
it's on the discussion on the Brazen. There's a discussion. We're next to people. There's a discussion. I don't know. I'm not. I shouldn't answer that, Allison. I sort of stumbled my way into the industry because I started a company. I didn't really break into it. But maybe Allison, you came in from outside the industry. Maybe you can give people some advice on how to get into the cannabis industry.
Yeah. When I first got into the industry, I came from ad world, so I was working in New York. Working on like large clients like Converse, Coca-Cola, things like that, brands of that nature. And one of the questions that I got asked a lot when I first entered into cannabis was, I do XYZ. So obviously I'm like agency kind of creative background, like I'm a producer or I'm a strategist or I'm a brand manager. Can I work in cannabis? And I think even I had this notion of like, oh, it's cannabis. It's very foreign, like it's like Mars, like it's not the same as anything else. But realistically, every job outside of cannabis, like in any other CPG industry, all of those same roles exist in cannabis. So like, even if you don't have cannabis experience, if you have experience brand building, there's a role for you somewhere. If you have experience in operations, there's definitely a role for you somewhere. So I think it's like, just making sure that you're not too narrow-minded about like, oh, I have the skills in XYZ industry. Is that transferable to cannabis? Guarantee you 9 out of 10 times it's going to be transferable. And coming in with experience outside of cannabis while still holding immense amount of respect for the legacy culture that is cannabis and the legacy that surrounds this plant and the use of this plant and the production of this plant. Like, I think that's incredibly important to remember. There's a long-standing history of cannabis and cannabis use and a culture around it. And coming in and just being like big, shiny exec from somewhere else going to break into the cannabis space, like I think you have to just be humbled and remember that there is that level of needing to understand the legacy that is in this space, especially for us in a product category that is, the first form factor that was ever used to consume this product. So maybe more so for us than some of these newer delivery methods of product. But yeah, I would say for getting into the space, it's like, just understand that it's just like any other industry out there, and your skills are 100% transferable into the cannabis space, and having skills in other industries and being able to take things that work really well in other industries and apply it to cannabis. Like, Lord knows there's a lot of room for improvement in this space. We're a young industry overall, and there's ways that we could be doing things better. So having some of those outside inputs to figure out how we continue to evolve the market overall and evolve this industry overall and establish it and mature it is incredibly important. So that would be my advice.
So
I think Allison's input was great. The only thing, Allison, that I would add is just be patient, right? So sometimes I think people come in and they could add a lot of value and they do have great ideas, but to your point, it is such a nascent industry, and there are so many ways in which we are hobbled that they get impatient, or they don't realize quite the hurdles they're going to have to jump through to get things done. And I think in the long run, people could add tremendous value, but you just got to take a deep breath, have some patience, and know that it'll take a little bit of time to work it all out.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I had another question here that looks like something similar has been asked in the comments. So I wanted to talk a little bit about social responsibility, equity, inclusion. It's very important, I mean, across industries, but especially in cannabis right now. And it also can be a real brand differentiator, which ties into the panel overall. So I wanted to give you all an opportunity to kind of share what your companies are doing in regards to social responsibility.
I'm happy to kick it off. 1906, so the name, starts with our name. 1906 was the year that the Wiley Act was passed, which effectively started the prohibition of cannabis. And our mission is to bring cannabis back to its pre-prohibition status, but also highlight the failed century of the war on drugs, and which really was a war on people, and the devastating impact that it's had on communities of color. We have a moral responsibility to end mass incarceration. The fact that there are still people in jail today, or even not in jail, but still suffering the consequences of what was a heinous policy of prohibition is immoral. And we as a society, we as leaders have a moral responsibility to end that. There should not be anyone in jail, and there should not be anybody that's still suffering the consequences of prohibition. So, do your part, vote for the right folks, contribute to the Last Prisoner Project, become educated, talk about it. I think, for us, that is one of the first things that needs to happen. And then we have a commitment that we contribute back 5% of our net revenues back to communities that we operate in. So, we put our money where our mouth is in order to do that. I don't think, but I also think, I don't think we're doing anywhere near enough. I think as an industry, we still really suck at social equity and social change. There are too many companies who are also, not doing their part. There are too many white people in this industry, and it's shameful, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that you said there, Peter. From Old Pal's perspective, we've had a foundation of giving back since that's inherent in our roots. Our program, Legalized Humanity, where we are collecting the sale of legalized humanity merchandise and donating that to organizations that are working on building a better and more equitable future for all. We're currently supporting National Expungement Week, and since everything that has happened this year with COVID and Black Lives Matter movement and just the civil unrest, we spent a lot of time, like back in the beginning of COVID, like April, May, June, really taking a hard look at how do we put a little more skin in the game versus just donating some money. So really working on rounding out programs where we're not only donating money, but we're donating our time, our service, our expertise in the space. So we've got 6 people who are mentors with our academy, which is a mentorship program for social equity applicants. Again, we could have a whole panel on everything that's wrong with social equity and those programs. I don't care what state you look at; it's a pretty poor effort all around. But trying to support people who are going through these programs as their way in, their foot in the door, and giving them a leg up and understanding what to be weary of as a social equity applicant, and also just giving them the skills and just sharing knowledge. I think that's one beautiful thing about the cannabis space is that, well, yes, it is incredibly competitive, and there are some of those like pesky brands out there that maybe aren't team players. Overall, I think you're going to find more often than not, most brands are here to help each other out, because we help each other out, we help the industry out. And so it's kind of the same thing approach that we're taking in terms of our time and effort to be supporting programs like our academy and National Expungement Week, getting people on the ground. Obviously, on the ground support right now looks a little different than it did 6 months, 8 months ago, but really trying to figure out like, how do we as Old Pal, a team that is incredibly well versed in this space, being one of the top brands in the nation from a flower perspective. So really trying to make sure that we're extending that expertise and lending hands where we can beyond just donating money. And then taking a look to it, like our policies internally, we're adding in policies to make sure that we've got diverse applicants for any job openings that we have. Making sure that we have diversity, equity, and inclusion training in our policy and in our handbooks and things like that. So there are consumer-facing and like industry-facing things that we're doing, but also taking a hard look at just our organization internally and where can we improve and where can we support our staff that are not white, frankly, and like making them feel like there's a place for everyone in this industry and helping to just expand upon the diversity that's coming into the space. So that's what we're working on at Old Pal right now.
Awesome.
So I would just add, to this discussion, Last Prison Project, yes, we were a early partner for those guys, strategic partner. Their logo and information about the organization is on every one of our packages. Not in every state yet, but certainly in Colorado and in a few other states. So I'm supporting them through visibility, but also our dollars on a regular basis. But where we really, I think, made some interesting strides this year, in addition to also supporting food scarcity programs in the states that we're in, as well as a couple of other social equity programs, is we took, I mentioned earlier that COVID gave us a little bit of time to reflect internally on who we are as a brand and do some work there. And, the social justice, social equity issue that was obviously brought to a very significant light long ago, but most recently with George Floyd, we took a really hard look at that. We said, what can we do? How can we make a difference? What are the things that we need to be considering? Allison was kind of referring to a little bit of what they did in terms of internal soul searching. And we were doing the same and finding that the conversations were sometimes difficult. Sometimes we didn't know what direction to go. We didn't know what the answers were, and there were awkward discussions. And we decided that to kind of document that a little bit, and we were building resources to help educate ourselves, educate our employees, and going through this journey, that it would make sense to potentially share that. So we ended up creating a site called Cannabis for Justice that we launched about a month ago, cannabisforjustice.com, that is a little bit about WANA and our journey, just so that people understand why we created the site. But really, it's meant to be a site company so that they can potentially find some resources to help them come to grips with some of these issues and how they can make changes within their organizations. Really proud of that effort. I'm hoping that we continue to get input from people in the cannabis community, but also just from around the country as to how we can make it better and improve the ability for our fellow cannabis companies to make changes within their system to help eradicate some of the systemic racism that we know exists in cannabis.
Well, thank you guys. I know we are definitely over time, but I'm just going to end with one question, which is, who here is hiring?
We're hiring in some roles in Illinois and Massachusetts, in kind of sales and brand ambassador roles. Massachusetts and in Illinois.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Same, as we open up new markets, that's really where a lot of our hiring efforts go. On the ground, territory managers, sales. Our territory managers are essentially our sales and brand ambassadors and brand managers on the ground. So we'll be hiring in those states as we launch. So there'll be more information coming out in the next few weeks here for Old Pal. So we'll definitely be hiring on that level forward.
Awesome. Joe?
We have a marketing role, so some field marketing as well as an out-of-state coordinator. So as we begin to expand into other states, we need some additional support there to help with the marketing coordination of those states. And then also, as those guys mentioned, on the brand ambassador side. So we've got a couple of roles that, also one more, which is data analyst on the sales side.
Awesome. Well, I've seen in the comments here, there's a lot of interest, and people, thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our audience for being so engaged. I'll also say LeafLink is hiring, and we do have a booth at this event. So go on, check it out, and talk to our recruiting team, check our website. And again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. A big virtual round of applause for our panelists, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day and enjoys the full event.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Broadcast is over.